Hello, in this clip, we're looking at Clause 6.1 of ISO 9001, Actions to Address Risks and Opportunities. It's divided into two subclauses. Broadly, the first subclause, 6.1.1, asks us to consider the issues that need to be addressed. And I guess then, the next logical thing would be then to plan in part two, to plan for what are these actions. So those of you who are using the contextual issues register, this comes into play, when considering the criteria for this particular clause. So let's have a look at the first part. Okay. When planning for the quality management system, the organization shall consider the issues referred to in 4.1 and the requirements referred to in 4.2 and determine the risks and opportunities that need to be addressed. Okay, so there's the reference to the contextual issues register from clause 4.2, which is relevant to interested parties and their requirements. We've gone through an analysis in a previous video clip to determine, how to respond to that criteria. And I suppose the purpose of identifying the interested parties and their needs and expectations is to establish the requirements that the organization we need to adopt. And when we consider the relationship with those interested parties, issues arise, which then feed into the contextual issues register. So it's a very important register when it comes to this point. So consider the issues that are on that register, if you like. And then for what purpose, right? A, to give assurance that the quality management system can achieve its intended results. Just a point I'd like to make, I've probably made it before, that let's drop the word quality in our thinking here. It's the management system for everything we do, if everything we do is within the scope of that quality management system. So it's to give assurance that we can achieve what we intend to do through our operations and our processes, which fall under the scope of the management system. B, enhance desirable effects. So this is referring to the opportunities. If something like Brexit poses an opportunity for you, well, how can you enhance the desirable effects from that opportunity? C, prevent or reduce undesired effects. So if there's a risk which needs to be mitigated, you would decide on A, the potential impact of the risk. So what would happen if we do nothing? And what are the mitigations that we can possibly do to prevent, reduce, or completely remove the undesirable effects. And D, achieve improvement. So it may be that consideration for a risk, while it may have negligible impact on an organization on a day-to-day basis, an improvement might be to put a preventive measure in place so that it further mitigates should the potential impact arise. I guess another way of looking at it would be achieving improvements, not just to the management system, but also for those who are constantly or continually looking for improvements to processes, evading of trends in the marketplace and trends in technology and so on. Improvements along predetermined market-led initiatives is also something that needs to be considered. So for 6.1.1, it's all about taking the issues that we've already identified and considering them to make sure that we consider them across this range of parameters. It's reasonably straightforward. If you need any help, give us a call through the usual section on the website. So part two, to do with the planning. So actions to address these risks and opportunities. So we've considered them within the range, and now we've decided, well, some of these require actioning, and some will be risks, some will be opportunities. Referring to our contextual issues register, the right-hand side of that register is largely to do with risk assessment and risk treatment. We can use that space for objective treatments and planning as well. So firstly, let's look at the criteria. So the organization shall plan A, actions to address these risks and opportunities, and B, how to integrate and implement these actions into its quality management system processes, and 2, evaluate the effectiveness of these actions. So, yeah, actions of just determining what you're going to do. Well, that's a straightforward thing. For each of those issues, when you look at them in turn, there will be something that the organization can do to mitigate, prevent, or avail of an opportunity. Let's write it down. What are those actions? Who's going to take responsibility for it? What are the expectations? So my suggestion then would be, consideration here should be for, is there a need for a planned response? Does it need to be treated as a process? Should it be an incident response plan? Should it be a business continuity consideration? But then, of course, there are opportunities, and there are so many mechanisms that one could think of for managing opportunities, but we'll talk about an objectives register when we address the requirements for Clause 6.2 subsequently. I guess to answer 612B.1, integrate and implement the actions into its management system processes. So the criteria here refers us back to Clause 4.4, where you might remember we've documented our processes at a high level on the scope statement, and we've looked at the process risk register. So one of the things there would be a way, for example, of implementing actions to address risks within a process. Well, if that process is documented on the process risk register, it's in there that we would carry out a risk assessment of the potential issue that's identified. Evaluating the effectiveness of these actions. So where it's within processes, it's very easy for us to incorporate the evaluation of the effectiveness of risk treatments and objectives or initiatives for improvement into our internal audit program. So that was something that the criteria would be specified on the process risk register where appropriate, and that would allow then the internal audit function to take over and benchmark performance against the documented information. I guess there is a note to be taken here in the criteria. Following the bullet points, you've got another requirement there. Actions taken to address risks and opportunities shall be proportionate to the potential impact on the conformity of products and services. So there's a reality check has to be done where, it's an organization might be able to sustain a certain level of availability of a machine, for example, and risk to the entire operation could be if that machine breaks down, well, the company's interrupted in its stride, it can't proceed. So what's the likelihood of the risk has to be considered? What's the potential impact? What's the incident response plan? Is there a business continuity consideration? And then subsequently, how do you evaluate that? And how do you measure then if it has been proportionate? Well, you might need a little bit of consultancy here. There are 2 notes. Note 1, options to address risks can include avoiding. That's straightforward. How do you avoid? Well, you don't do the work. Taking risk in order to pursue an opportunity, that's where you accept the risk. Eliminating the risk at source. Well, that's a major mitigation. So that's action, that's where you would reduce. Changing the likelihood or consequences, that's also a reduction. Sharing the risk, transferring, or retaining risk by informed decision. In other words, it's not that you're doing nothing, you might be preparing in another way. So I suppose the balance here is an auditor would expect that if you're accepting a risk without mitigation, that you have some serious consideration for incident response and business continuity should the risk manifest itself. So yeah, minimal mitigation maximizes your consideration for incident management. I hope that makes sense to you. Note 2, opportunities can lead to the adoption of new practices, launching new products, opening new markets, addressing new customers, building partnerships, using new technology and other desirable and viable possibilities to address the organization's or its customers' needs. Kind of already referenced this in a passerby way. Opportunities feed into objectives, which is something that we're going to look at in a future video clip. But I suppose what's been asked of here is really at a high level, strategically, I suppose the intent of the clause is to specify the planning needed as a prerequisite, if you like, for establishing the management system. And it specifies at this stage, what needs to be considered, what needs to be addressed, and what's the mechanism for managing all of this. I'm not going to take it too much further now, other than to say that Enable ISO customers will be aware of the contextual issues register, the process risk register, and the objectives register, and how they all work together. So really, anything that's being mitigated needs to be managed then subsequently to make sure that those mitigations are suitable and effective. Hopefully that's enough information for you to address the requirements of this clause. Well done, keep going, take care.